Retro League football fans. Welcome to the first of hopefully many shows. We don't exactly have a name for this show yet, but we're going to call it the Retro Podcast for now, and we'll open it up to you guys if you have a great name for us to use or a logo or design. But this is the first one that we're doing in this off season, and you've got myself, Cleesby, the Baltimore Colts GM here. I'm going to be sort of hosting the show as we go along through the ups and downs and twists and turns of the Retro Football League over the coming seasons and years. But today I'm also joined by a second producer on the show who's going to talk a little bit about his journey through the Retro Football League to date. And, well, we've got probably the best person placed because he is the current champion of the Retro Football League, and that is Wobbegong, the Baltimore Bills GM. Wobbegong, welcome very much to the show. The first one we've got here, but Christmas time, looking forward to it. But you're sort of going away at this period celebrating a Super Bowl win.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really fun to do this show. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, I mean, that's the best Christmas present I could, or early Christmas present I could have. Winning the Super Bowl definitely means a lot, and I've tried my best over the last few seasons to actually come to this point. So really happy to celebrate this Christmas with the 1982 Super Bowl championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a long time coming for the Bills fans and yourself since the very start of the Retro Football League. There have been some down times, there have been some okay times, and then there's obviously been the success that has happened this year. And, well, we were discussing a little bit in terms of what we thought we could do for the first episode, and we know we're obviously in the midst of the coach hiring season at the moment, and, well, the fun that comes with hiring about 300 coaches now, thank you to DDS 25. But, it's not quite that interesting. And, we're not quite there in terms of free agency or the scouting of the draft. And, well, what an interesting off-season that's going to be when we get to both of those. We kind of thought it'd be interesting to kind of talk through the journey of your team, really, because, well, you started at the very beginning. You had a very difficult start. There were some really interesting moves and transactions and I imagine learning that you did through to get to the Super Bowl championship and be the winner this year. So should we dive into it and have a little bit of a discussion about your journey through the Retro Football League, and hopefully what people will take away from this is that hopefully take some learning, they'll take some understanding and get a sense for the real history of the Retro Football League, because we are quite a number of seasons into this multiplayer league now, so there is a real history of teams building up and a legacy that's worth talking about as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has been the 7th season already, that's quite a lot. And as you said, quite a lot of learning for me to do during these seasons to actually improve. But it has been a fun journey to actually also see where I came from. There's one player left on my championship roster that has been there already in the very first season, my strong safety, Mario Clark. But other than that, it has been a journey and quite a lot of transactions, draftings, and free agency acquisitions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Wobbegong, I think let's start with, you came into the Retro Football League from the very start. I mean, what was your background with Draft Day Sports Pro Football prior to this? Was this the first multiplayer league that you had joined? Had you been in other ones? And what was your kind of experience and history before we even get started with your Retro Football League journey?
Yeah, it was actually my very first multiplayer league. Before that, I was just playing myself, playing against the CPU and doing my best to win championships there. It worked quite often, and I decided to also do some YouTube videos. It was just fun to do this, and also created an expansion team, the Munich Wolverines, and just played around a little bit with the system and getting also college players in. I thought, well, maybe there is a new chance to do something else. And my biggest point actually with the single player mode was the drafting, because it wasn't that fun since you can't really trade up or down. And that's actually the fun of the draft. I really love the draft. Draft weekend is actually my very favorite weekend over the Super Bowl weekend in reality. So that's the fun of the game. And I thought in a multiplayer league, that's something that you can experience even better. And in the beginning, I was happy to join. I thought I would not be good because I don't have multiplayer league experience compared to other owners who are in multiple leagues and have their own playbooks or something like that. I didn't have that in the beginning. And I chose the Buffalo Bills, which were one of the worst teams of that area, because I like rebuilding a team and I like doing that via the draft. And although there are other good strategies of just using your draft assets to trade for good players, that was something in the beginning I thought I don't want to do. So I was actually quite fine with being bad in the first couple of seasons and getting good players through the draft. In my very first draft, I got a really, really good cornerback that is also a key piece now on my team, which was actually Claiborne. And from that on, I used the drafts to get new talent in. And the first couple of seasons were really just learning how the world of multiplayer leagues actually work and trying my best to get good drafts in, but no older players in free agency, because I thought, well, there's no sense in trying to be good if I don't have a core roster around the key players. So I thought, well, focusing on younger talents and the draft, then that was kind of the strategy for the first 2 years. But as you can see, I won 3 games in the very first season, 2 games in the second one. And it's not fun to lose all the time. So a turnaround needed to happen.
Yeah, so let's talk about those first 2 seasons. I guess you had some interesting pieces. I mean, obviously, anyone who knows the NFL history and background, the Bills were pretty atrocious at this time, but there was a couple of decent lights that were you could build around. I mean, you had OJ Simpson, the notorious running back who was in the prime of his career really at that point, and then you also had Joe Ferguson, who obviously looked like a pretty elite quarterback to kind of have, and then I guess the rest of the roster at this moment in time was a bit lacking. So, I mean, what was your initial reaction sort of turning up? You said obviously you were thinking about young guys and building that, but was there any other inclination that you had of actually this is the direction I want to take at this moment in time, or anything that kind of inspired you to kind of feel that there was going to be improvement with the Bills as you kind of progressed in the Retro Football League?
In the beginning, I thought maybe time will help me in getting a few bad drafts in and good key players. But it was not supposed to happen. I also tried to trade OJ Simpson in the beginning because I thought, well, a running back with 100 overall, maybe I can get some good assets out of that. I know that running backs are especially important in our league, but I thought, well, maybe I can get 2 or 3 good players out of that, but no one was interested for a price I was willing to take the offer on. But in 1978, I actually got an offer for Joe Ferguson. And as you can imagine, you're not certainly keen on trading away your best player on offense, which was actually the quarterback. But it was actually an offer by the Eagles, and they offered 3 first-round picks. In the beginning, I was really hesitant to accept that, and actually, the Eagles accepted another offer with the Cincinnati Bengals, if I remember correctly. But the trade did not go through, and I realized that the middle of the night. I was awake. I don't know why, but I checked my mobile phone and saw, well, the Eagles actually went for another offer and it did not go through. And I took the chance to reply and take a little bit less because in the beginning I was asking for 2 additional players. And and in the end, our trade went through, and I traded Joe Ferguson for 3 first rounders plus Glenn Carano, which I got in return, which happened to be my starting quarterback for 2 years. And then my backup quarterback until today. He's doing a great job, but certainly the reason for change came with those 3 first-round picks. In this season, I went 8-8, which was quite good, but still not where I was hoping to go. But the draft after that, 1979 with Mark Gastineau, which I traded up for, that was really the key piece for me to also actually build a good defense. My offense was decent with a really, really good running back, but that was the first year where I started to actually build a strategy and get some key pieces for the roster. So although it sounds like a bold move, trading your franchise quarterback, that was actually the move that helped me to get there, to get this team to a winning record.
So let's talk a little bit about those opening seasons and then going 8-8 and trading your key quarterback. So you mentioned when you came in, you hadn't sort of built playbooks before. You kind of used a lot of the CPU playbooks it sounded like, and obviously there was an uptick in probably capability to kind of compete with the guys who have been building playbooks in leagues, in multiplayer leagues for a very long time. That balanced off against trading your star quarterback is a really gutsy move, right? So how had the progression of your understanding of the game sort of developed over those 3 or 4 seasons? What were the key kind of things that you learnt along those losing seasons, really, to get to the point where the team's gone 8-8 and you are comfortable enough to make, a big player move? You're moving one of the best quarterbacks in the league at the time to basically rebuild and regenerate the team going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I learned from the winners in this year that it actually takes a complete roster and not just a quarterback without any talent to be successful. And especially in our league, I think you can also be quite successful with a good running back or good O-liner. We'll maybe come to that later on. But it does not necessarily need only a quarterback to be good. And that was something I learned when looking at Palm's roster. I mean, he won the first 2 years, pretty sure, at least the very first season. He had a really, really complete roster and did not have any weaknesses at any positions. And I knew that I need to take some radical steps to actually get to that, because the good quarterback is gonna age, and until then, I won't have a good roster. There's not much good and young talent on the free agency market, or especially not in those seasons, since everyone tried to keep their key players, and I did not have that many problems with salary cap. So I needed to find new ways of getting good players in. And as that one is actually being not that great, which helped me to get good players through the draft, but then also getting more draft assets for the first and second round to get some key players in, because I think, at least in my opinion, the key to success is more than just the quarterback. As said, it really needs a complete team. My strategy then was, okay, option one, either I use the first 3 round picks for other positions to build around the roster and maybe add a quarterback in the later years and then be successful. That was option one, which I went with. Option two was actually drafting Joe Montana in 1979. I thought, well, when I have 3 first round picks, I could actually trade up to the first overall pick. But I decided against that, since I learned in 1978 that also a backup quarterback can play well with the right playbook or the right instructions. For example, that's something I still use today. I do not have any run pass options in my playbook. I don't know if they actually work, but with my quarterbacks who have a good arm but actually no intelligence at all, they were just really, really bad with run pass options. So I decided to change my playbook and fit it to the roster I had at this moment, which was in 1978, run the ball and give the quarterback easy options for the passing game. That helped me to be better than the first 2 seasons combined. Still not there yet, but at least I had some key players to build around, except from a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting points that you mentioned there that I think someone listening can kind of take away, which is they're obviously building your playbook and your style and what options you want to run based around the skills that you have available. So it's no good having this amazing playbook that has a lot of run pass options if you haven't got a quarterback who can run pass options, because they don't have the intelligence. Play to the strengths of the players that you have. But I just want to go back a little bit and mention. So obviously, for those who don't know, the Joe Ferguson trade, it didn't happen at the beginning of the season. It wasn't at the end of the season in 78. It was sort of in week 5, and at that point, I believe you had gone 3-2. So you obviously made that trade. You then had sort of a win, a loss, a win, and then you went. I believe it was 5 games where you had a losing streak of 5 games to get towards the end of the season. Then you picked it back up with a 3-game winning streak to bring you back into 8-8. I mean, what was running through your mind at that moment in time? You just traded Ferguson away. You'd had a bit of a bounce from it to begin with, and then you had these back-to-back defeats through 5 weeks of the game. Were you thinking that you'd miscalculated something, that something wasn't quite working? What was going through your mind at that point before you got the bounce back to get to that .500 record, which was the Bills' best record in the Retro League to date at that point?
Yeah, as you said, the trade happened after week 4, and I won against bad teams at this time, against the Jets, Colts, and Chiefs, but I lost against the good ones, the Steelers and Dolphins. So that was the initiative why I said, well, if I want to win against the good teams as well, something needs to change, and that's why I decided to trade the quarterback. But yeah, as you said, after that, I won 2 games in 3 weeks, and after that, lost 5 in a row. I think one of the key parts of this was getting the defense right. I played around with the settings. As you can see, I did not get them right since in week 14. I still got 35 points against me, but still it changed a little bit. And I just tried to play with the settings. I did not change the playbook, pretty sure, in this year, but just changing the settings, trying to see what works best for me with the current roster, and trying to find a good balance between passing the ball and running the ball. I think it's important to not only run the ball, but with the backup quarterback, basically you're limited in your passing attack. But in the last 3 weeks, I was able to figure it a little bit out offensively. At least I thought. We're going to talk about the season after that. But a few changes that seemed to work during my losing streak to then start winning for the last 3 games of this year.
Yeah, so you obviously come out of the 78 season and it's looking like an upward progression, really. 8-8, not really in the playoff hunt, to be fair, at the moment. The Dolphins are still dominating the AFC East. Going into the off-season, you're probably feeling pretty good with a 3-win bounce. And then we then get to the 79 season and we end up with a 4-12 record. As you said, there were some really interesting trades and draft positions that you kind of made at this point. But, what made you, what was your going through your thoughts at the time when you got to that off-season? Was it a case of you were expecting to kind of get back up there, or were you kind of moving things around to kind of restructure the team for a bigger bounce back after a drop?
My strategy was defense first, to be honest. I had 2 first-round picks this year because the 3rd first rounder was the year after that. I traded up either once or twice and got my linebacker Jerry Robinson and actually Mark Gastineau. So 2 defensive picks with the first round. Free agency was also heavily focused around defense. I got another linebacker and tried to get better also on edge and cornerback. And just investing everything in defense that I had because I thought I figured offense out. Defense, no idea. So I thought, well, couldn't be a bad choice to just add additional talent and getting better, especially on defensive tackle and defensive end. I got Charles Dejournay in a trade at the beginning of this year for a 3rd round pick, 81 overall defensive tackle. I know that defensive tackles are not that highly valued in the game, but I needed to stop the run. I needed to do something, and I thought I need to beef up my D-line and actually get good talent in there. So that was a key year for me to get my defense better. And that was the strategy over the offseason. I think I did no pick this year on offense, maybe in the later rounds, but not in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this was the year, if I remember correct, that you made the O.J. Simpson trade as well. So you also dealt away, one of the big cornerstones of the Bills franchise to this point. So you kind of moved the franchise quarterback in Ferguson, you'd moved the franchise running back in O.J. Simpson, and the team was kind of going on a completely different path now to where it initially was. Then we obviously move on to the 80 season, and we get the the big bump, I guess, that was you were hoping for, which is going from, well, to be honest with you, from bottom of the AFC East to the top of the AFC East, with a 13-3 record. And what in your head kind of clicked? How did you what did you adjust at that point? What were the learnings you took from the 79 season into the 80 season that kind of got you from from top to the bottom within your division?
Yeah, actually, good point that you brought up with OJ Simpson. That was my third first rounder. I forgot about that because I had two initially. But after that, my strategy was just to write every owner who had the next pick and offer OJ Simpson in exchange for a first rounder because I wanted to have Tony Nathan. I thought he has a similar playing style. He was also able to catch the ball as a running back. And in the end, I traded with the Kansas City Chiefs. They got OJ Simpson, and I was able to draft Tony Nathan at the 23rd overall pick. So one offensive pick was made, as you said. Just getting younger was the strategy there. But yeah, for the 90-80 season, it was again starting with the draft. I had the second overall pick. And first overall, a quarterback went. Also in this offseason, I decided, okay, last offseason, I put a lot into defense. So now I need to start investing into offense again because it was not working. I used the same playbook, but got worse. So I decided to invest in a new quarterback and I traded for Cliff Stouch, who was originally a first rounder in the very first season, if I remember correctly, with the Eagles. The Eagles put him on practice squad. The Bengals picked him up, and I traded a second round pick to the Bengals for Cliff Stout, who was an 83, 84 overall at this time. So I had a quarterback where I thought similar play style to Carano, really good arm, not that great intelligence, and also a decent accuracy, but able to work within my playbook, and got just basically the better version of Carano. And that was one key piece on offense. The other one then was in the draft. I had the second overall pick, where I started with. First overall went to QB, and second overall, I was really unsure whether I should invest into the O-line and draft Anthony Munoz or invest into the playmakers and get another wide receiver, which would have been Art Monk at the second overall pick. And I took my time to really think about this and decided to invest into the O-line and draft Anthony Munoz at second overall because I'm still convinced that this was one key to my championship, getting a really good D-line and O-line, which helped with the running game, helped with pass protection, and Anthony Munoz has been a superstar since then. But the second part of the story is I traded up to also get Art Monk. Fourth overall, third overall, another player went. So I traded up, invested key piece on offense who was older. That was kind of the story I had during the seasons, getting younger with every position and using the older players as capital to get new younger players. So I traded up and also drafted Art Monk. And with this offense, new quarterback, new star left tackle, and new wide receiver, I was able to get a complete turnaround. And from an average of 18.9 points scored, I went up to nearly 35 points scored, so nearly double the amount. And I think that was basically because of those three key pieces on offense.
Yeah, I mean, if you manage to acquire those three pieces in an off season, you're looking really strong. I think a really good take through of those three guys. Let's just go back to Stout. I mean, I think what was really fascinating, and you won't see this on your side because it's going to come up on my screen, but for those watching on YouTube later, they will see that there was a massive set of gains by Stout from sort of arguably from the 79 season onwards. I mean, just to give you some reference, he jumped 32 points in intelligence. So that must have been a training camp or something, I'd assume, a mini camp.
Definitely.
So that was a massive jump up for him. And then we're looking at sort of the training camp. He jumped 2 in accuracy, 3 more in intelligence. He then added arm accuracy and agility over the remaining seasons. In 81, he got +5 in accuracy. So he's gone, really huge gains from his initial start in 76. And no doubt some of that is due to actually playing. We can see that through the season. A lot of it seems to come in season for him rather than the training camps. So really huge improvement. I mean, that 75 intelligence then takes him into sort of the elite quarterback range, really. And when you're looking at it,
Yeah, there are actually 3 or 4 mini camps invested into him because he was a project in 1976 when the Eagles drafted him. He always had a great arm, but other than that, there was nothing to play with. And I guess that was the reason why the Eagles put him on practice squad. And he did also not play a single snap for the Cincinnati Bengals in the 2 seasons after that. It was development through minicamp. And in the first season where the Bengals started him, he was not that good, 18 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. But since then, I guess with another minicamp and maybe a playbook that suits him better, he has been playing really, really well for me. Although he's actually, compared to other quarterbacks in the league, the 20th best quarterback. So not even in the elite part when you compare overall, but he played elite, and that was something that really helped me to get to this point. Of course.
yeah. And I think the takeaway I would give to everyone listening and watching is the the value in sort of developing players through the mini camp, through training camp, through playing them. Stout is probably a prime example of that, right? As you mentioned, he was essentially a pickup for Cincinnati at that point. A bit of effort and time, they managed to flip him onto you for something, and then you spent the time and effort kind of working with him, working to his strengths, and now we're looking at the fruition of that in terms of him being an elite quarterback, carrying the team to a Super Bowl. But let's move on to the other two that you mentioned, which was Munoz, the tackle. And there's something really interesting that I wanted to just you to elaborate on a little bit, which was you mentioned the importance of having a good O line in retro league football in particular. And what do you think Munoz kind of brings that you were kind of possibly lacking prior to this, that kind of bumped that O line up to where you wanted it to be?
Think he was one of the best rookies in this draft. So from the beginning, he had a very, very high overall. Especially strength is one of his better parts. If you look at that, it was over 80. So that was, of course, something that helped. Pass protection is, when you look at that, not elite, but still, because of his strength, I guess that was something that helped. He came out of the draft with 87 overall strength, 86 run blocking, and 78 pass blocking, which was fine for me because I was running the ball. And he was decent in pass blocking. I think that was because of his strength. But yeah, no one actually knows which player is good because of what. But yeah, he really helped the team in his rookie season. He was tied with Art Monk to win Offensive Player of the Year as an O-liner. He had 99 pancakes, only 2 sacks allowed. That was really, really good. And yeah, he was the key piece on offense. And since then, I tried to get additional pieces. When you look at my O-line right now, Munoz was the 2nd overall pick. I traded for Tim Irvin, which was the 28th overall pick. Had a sleeper on guard, another first rounder on guard, and a 4th round trade on center. So I invested quite a lot of resources into the O line, which I learned from the performance of Anthony Munoz. I thought, well, if one player can perform like this, if I have 5 players who are similar to that, this O line can be a really, really good weapon in the run game, of course, but also in pass protection to give my QB, who might be slow to decide which player to throw through, a little bit more time to decide.
Yeah, and then the final player that you mentioned was obviously Art Monk, the 4th pick in the same draft. I guess goes without saying he's an 80 speed, 80 hands, 80 agility type player. But I guess you kind of were looking for that elite receiver, and he certainly did bring that for you since he's kind of been in the league and been playing for you. So is it just a case of getting someone you just could rely on to kind of catch the ball and get the yards that you wanted from stout throwing, or was it something else you were looking for there?
Yeah, I needed young wide receiver. The year before that, I spent a 3rd round pick on Alfred Jenkins, who is now actually my best wide receiver. But the year without Art Monk, so in 1979, he had over 700 yards, 1 touchdown, and 6 drops. The first year with Art Monk, he had over 1,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 3 drops. So the main goal of Art Monk was to make my second wide receiver, Alfred Jenkins, better. And I think that helps to just have more forces on offense. You also can't forget Ozzie Newsome, my tight end, who also plays really, really good. So with Newsome, Jenkins, and Monk, I had 3 weapons to throw to. And I guess that helped me to figure out defenses that they can't account for all 3 players. So it left a lot of space for Alfred Jenkins. Of course, Art Monk had a great rookie season as well. In total, he had over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 4 drops. So similar to Jenkins. But I guess this player also helped the other wide receivers around him to get better because he's fast, because he's reliable. And he actually had 22 passes caught for over 20 yards and 5 passes caught for over 40 yards. So the explosiveness was definitely something I was missing at this point in my wide receiver core, and Art Monk helped me get that.
Yeah, and I guess obviously at this point, 13-3, you're probably thinking in great shape going into the off season, not into the off season, into the playoffs. You're then obviously thinking about progression. You know, big jump from where you were. Really in good shape. But obviously get through sort of, you know, obviously as the winner of the AFC East, take out the Raiders quite convincingly. Then come up scupper against probably one of the playoff sort of regulars in the Houston Oilers, and I'm interested in your reflections at that point. You'd obviously built a young, developing team. You'd had some elite talent that was coming through that was young, as you mentioned. What were your thoughts then at that point? Was it a case of you thinking something was missing from this team to really be up there and getting over that final hurdle to kind of get into the Super Bowl, or was it a case of I just need to sit, be patient, our time will come?
Yeah, similar to 2 years earlier, I thought offense was fine, so I need to invest in defense again. And I did the same strategy all over again. I used both of my first round picks to invest in defense. Maybe that was overcompensating for the loss in the championship game against the Oilers, where I did not have any chance at all on defense. And I thought I need to add just new talent, maybe figuring it out a little bit more. I think I did not change my playbook either this year. And so I thought it was going well. I won 13 games in the regular season. I just need to get better. My players were also getting better because most of them were actually young. But I needed to invest, and that was a really good draft to invest in. 1981 with quite a lot of good defensive players. Thanks to an earlier trade in the year before, where I traded away my mid to late first round pick to the San Francisco 49ers, which happened to get the first overall pick the next year. So I drafted Lawrence Taylor, which was actually something I regretted in this moment because I had a really good offer by the Giants who wanted to have Lawrence Taylor and basically offered me 3 or 4 first round picks. I guess it was 3, the second overall pick and 3 other ones or 2 other ones. So I could have had other good defensive players, but I decided to draft Lawrence Taylor because I thought he's by far the best player of this draft. He was not. He played a vital role for me this year and also the last year. So he was incredible for me. But at this moment, I thought, well, I should have taken additional picks. With the 7th overall pick, I also drafted Hanford Dixon, another good cornerback. And then I had with Claiborne, a 91 overall cornerback, and Hanford Dixon, 86 overall rookie. I had really good players on cornerback. And Lawrence Taylor, together with Jerry Robinson on linebacker, was also really good. In addition to that, I also traded for another defensive tackle and also got Bill Stanfill from the Dolphins, an aging edge player. But I thought now is the time to go all in. And with all in, for me, I don't mean trading away my whole draft of the next few years or trading away first round picks for 35 overall players. But in this case, I spent a second rounder to trade for 88 overall, 34-year-old Bill Stanfill to get this defense really to an elite level for the next year. And now was the time to actually also invest in the older players and think about who else could be the missing piece to win a championship in 1981.
Yeah, really, really interesting recap there. I mean, the Lawrence Taylor thing. Would you say that's your one regret so far in the Retro Football League was not actually taking the Giants up on that trade?
At this point, for sure. Today, I can't confirm that because he played so great. Of course, there's always an what if in case I would have other players, but Lawrence Taylor this year he had 13 sacks and 8 forced fumbles, so he was one of my best defensive players and also played a really important role during the playoffs. So I think at this time that was my biggest regret, but now it made sense, and he was one of the core pieces who actually got me the Super Bowl. So at this point, I would not regret
It's always
drafting
tough,
Lawrence
isn't it?
Taylor.
Because you're always thinking could have, would have, maybe should have, but then you're wondering was that
Yeah,
maybe the one thing that I did that actually had the biggest impact? And at the end of the day, you won the Super Bowl this year. So in reflection, you kind of say, well, actually, every move I've made to this point must have been okay because I've come out on top. It's always an interesting one to think
could
back
be.
on. So let's just jump into the 81 season. Obviously 12-4, so similar record to the previous year. Again, top of the AFC East. Going into the playoffs, you obviously have the same run essentially. You kind of, rather than play the Raiders, you lost to the Bengals. Sorry, not didn't lose to the Bengals. You beat the Bengals in quite a convincing
Yeah,
fashion. You then get to the Steelers, and well, status quo from not the previous year. You come up scupper in the AFC conference matchup, and you know I've got to ask you again the exact same question, which is what was your reflection at this point? Because now you've been one game away from the big show
Mm.
at the end of it, the Super Bowl, and you have not quite made it again. So you obviously mentioned that in 80 you were thinking the team's young, it's developing, it's getting better. Was that the same reflection you had at this point, or were you starting to question actually was this team not quite good enough? Was the strategy not quite good enough to really get me over the line against, again, the Steelers are one of the regulars in the playoffs and one of the regulars up at the top in terms of championship and sort of fighting for everything. What were your thoughts and reflections at this point?
I was fairly convinced that I'm on the right track because I thought, well, I got lucky in the Bengals game. Actually, I had 5 or 6 forced fumbles, 2 or 3 from Lawrence Taylor. So there you go. But in the championship game against the Steelers, I could not get anything on offense. But this time, I thought I'm on the right track and just continue to do what I'm doing, using one of my 2 first rounders to invest in an older player. And I wanted to get better on linebacker, and I traded for Randy Gradishaw from the Denver Broncos, a first round pick for a 30-year-old player, 95 overall. And now I had 3 elite linebackers. That was the one big move I did this offseason. I did not sign a single free agent. I made some offers because I thought, well, I could get a little bit better, but I lowballed most of them because I thought I'm really tight on salary. And if I get them, that's nice, but I don't need to have them. So no free agent signings, one trade for an older linebacker. And my second first round pick was again investing in the O-line. I drafted a guard, Ron Hallstrom, 75 overall, which was also a really good move. At this time, I also had Big Joe on guard. I traded away him for Tim Irvin during the season to also get better on tackle, but worse on guard. But I thought tackle is more important, and my rookie played well. But as you can see, there were no big, bold moves. Just continue what I'm already doing, getting better, developing the players, and getting one additional difference maker on defense, which proved to be a difference maker. Gradisha played a great year, was also very important in the playoffs and in the regular season. He had nearly 100 tackles, 4 sacks, and also 4 forced fumbles. So he was really good for me. Also 10 tackles for loss. So another really good piece. And with those 3 linebackers, maybe he was the missing piece. Maybe not, but I decided to continue my strategy of the last 2 years, and just investing a little bit without, again, trading away a whole draft to get one or two key difference makers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that would have been my reflection. I would have said back to you is that it felt like you were tinkering rather than other seasons to date. There were some big structural changes that you made, whether that was, as you mentioned, tweaking playbooks, focusing on certain sides of the ball, or making real big moves in the draft in the off season to kind of acquire the elite young pieces that you wanted, the veterans that you wanted. This felt like a bit more of a, I'm just going to add one or two things, and then that should be enough. And we end the 82 season 14-2, again winning the AFC East now for 3 years running, and then we end up in the playoffs. And the first playoff game sees you facing the New England Patriots, and you squeeze out the game by 7 points, really, and that's probably the closest that anyone pretty much came to you. This game give you any worries or concerns or anything that you need to think about?
I always knew that the game against the Patriots will be a tough one. I lost one in week 2 against them, or I won this game and lost the other one with my backups. Yeah, but still, that was quite convincing how they beat me in week 15. But yeah, I thought, okay, this game will be tough. I did not change anything for the game against the Patriots. And after that, also for the championship game, no changes, because I thought my defense just needs to play better. And I trust them to do them, or to do this time. And I already played against the Steelers in week 1, where I won 34-6. And I thought, this is the year I play them again, but this time I can actually do that and beat them, hopefully, in the championship game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you then went into the Bills Steelers game and won quite convincingly, really. I mean, the Steelers were 6 points, you were 29. It looked pretty straightforward through most of the game, and then we get to the big one. We get to the Super Bowl final. You're up against none other than the Dallas Cowboys, who are probably one of the winningest teams in the Retro Football League. Plenty of Super Bowl titles to their name at this point. Obviously, dominated the early part of the Retro Football League and always been in and around sort of championship contender since then, really. Huge amounts of talent. Palmer's a GM, very good GM. Going into the game, I know we've talked about the results in a minute, but going into it, you said you didn't change anything. Was there anything you were thinking, this is going to be a real difficult challenge? Not sure if we have the right players or the right strategy. Is there anything that was giving you a concern going into this? I know the Steelers was a big win and the Patriots was a closer game, and were you completely confident that this was going to be your moment at this point?
Confident at all, to be honest. I was nervous the whole day. Also, the day before that against the Steelers, I was very nervous. But also against the Cowboys, I thought chances are 50-50. We both have really good teams. And I again decided against changing anything, because never change a winning system. And as you said, what if I would have never forgiven myself if I changed anything and lost? You would never know if I would have won with the original strategy. But that's why I thought it worked against the Patriots. It worked against the Steelers. So hopefully it works against the Cowboys as well. I did not change anything and just hope for the best. My biggest concern was my center. He got injured in the game against the Steelers, so I needed to release a few players to get in some cap space to be able to assign 2 free agent centers, because in case some of the signings did not go through, I signed 2 centers. So new center in the game. I don't know if that affects anything. In reality, you would have problems maybe with the snap count or anything, but yeah, I signed 2 new centers for this game. That was my biggest concern. Other than that, I thought, let's just continue doing what the team has done in the playoffs so far. And yeah, as you said, it worked out quite well. Really, really good win. So the strategy was perfect for the whole playoff run.
It really was. I mean, I think just to give people a recap who are watching this later, the Dallas game was again not close at all really. In the end, you kind of took the lead. You then so I should say Dallas took the lead. You then pulled them back, and then after that point, it was a runaway. I mean, at halftime, we were looking at 28-7. By the end of the third quarter, it was 37-7. So it was not really close at this point. I mean, the factor of the game, from what I can see and was watching it, was that you essentially outperformed them on offense. Your offense just absolutely exploded. I mean, Stout had a 141.4 QB rating, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was averaging 12.8 yards on the passing, which was absolutely outrageous. 428 yards he had in sort of total yards. 269 of it was passing, which is incredible, really, when you think about it. So no surprise that that you and the Bills came out on top in this one, because it just looked like that offense was just unstoppable on the day. And no matter what Dallas had and could throw at them, in which they had a huge amount of talent. Let's not forget Dallas are a very talented team, and with probably a really good strategy underneath them. It just wasn't close. So you'd got there, you'd got to the pinnacle moment, you'd won, fantastic. You've now had a little bit of time to kind of enjoy that moment, take it away, think about it, and I guess thinking about the reflection we've just been through, a little bit of a journey of the Buffalo Bills from the start to where we are now. Anything that you would like to sort of mention to get people to take away in terms of, starting from a base where you weren't building any playbooks by yourself, you weren't really exactly sure how to build a team, whether that was with an elite quarterback or other talent or whatever it may be, to the point now where you are, an RFL champion. You have absolutely blown through the playoffs, dominated Dallas, one of the best teams in the league. Anything that sort of really felt at the forefront of your mind that if you were new coming into this again, that you would really like to tell people about?
Yeah, the one key piece is losing isn't bad. That's the cool advantage of the NFL. If you're bad, you just get a higher draft pick. No need to be nervous, and if you're bad, draft or use your whole draft assets to draft aging players or anything like that. Being bad isn't that bad in football. We both know soccer, and if you're bad there, you just get relegated, which is really, really bad. And I've experienced that quite often, unfortunately. But yeah, in the NFL, losing isn't bad. So I would encourage every new owner, if they're not good in the first or second year, to not give up and maybe use their draft assets to get good players, and being patient and using these losing seasons to try new playbooks, new strategies, and thinking about which playbook could make sense for your specific roster. If you have key pieces to build around, that's something you should use. And then using the bad years to get good players, and then the good years, then you can start using your high draft assets to make your roster complete. That was something I also learned for myself. As said in the beginning, I don't need to have a star QB, and I don't have the picks right now for that, but I wouldn't trade up, me personally, next year to draft away my next 2 or 3 drafts just to get one of the really, really good QBs. They will be very important for other teams. I mean, you can see Joe Ferguson won MVP and he played really good. For my strategy, it was really more having a complete roster. So don't give up if you're losing. Just use that to refine your playbooks, strategy, and draft good talent.
Well, Bagog, that's really interesting and really good takeaway, I think, for anyone who's listening in. Really, is to build a strategy, really think about those losing years as to what's working well, what isn't working well, and then essentially try to map your players to things that it is working well, to make sure that you do get that upward improvement. And even if you don't, as you said, if you have your draft assets, you're going to be sitting pretty anyway, because you'll be landing a top pick in the RFL draft anyway, which is always great, because you'll be adding talent on top of talent. Look, it's been great to have you on. It's been a fascinating tour through the Buffalo Bills history, and from literally bottom of the league to championship winner is a fantastic story to take away and really listen and hear about. All the different players and personnel moves, the strategy changes you made are always great to understand. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through this. And I think what we're going to do next time, for anyone listening, is we're hopefully going to have a second episode where we're going to talk a little bit about the free agency period, a little bit about the upcoming draft in the Retro Football League. So if you've got any questions in relation to that, or anything you want us to talk about, please just let us know. If you've got topics for other episodes, we are of course interested to hear. And always worth mentioning, if you would like to join the show and talk about your team or talk about something else in the Retro Football League, please let me or Wobbegong know, and we will certainly get you included next time. But Wobbegong, it's been great to have you on, and we'll talk on the next one about free agency and the draft.
Yeah, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. And yeah, see you next time.